I've been asked to talk about habits of a flourishing life tonight, and at least the ones that I've found that have helped me to flourish. And that was kind of an interesting question to have to chew over the last few days. And I've appreciated the opportunity to give it some thought. And I have come up with five, and I came up with six because there's one I have not mastered yet, and I will share that with you as well. But when we're talking about a flourishing life, we're talking about not scraping by, not just doing the bare minimum, not surviving, not living day to day, but really leading the kind of life that's optimal, one that's filled with joy, contentment, that has meaning, that has purpose. It's sort of the kind of life that you always wanted to have. And to the degree that I have that, and I don't have it completely, but to the degree that I have that, I found a few things that have genuinely been helpful over the course of my life, that have added substantial value to my life, and have improved the quality of it, not only personally, but in my relationships with other people as well. So without further ado, the first one up, I'm going to get the easy one out of the way first, which is simply Orthodox observance. I thought, how best to put this? Is this a rule of prayer? Or are we talking about scripture reading? Are we talking about finding the faith? No, I sort of have to roll it all into one. Yeah, becoming Orthodox was one of the great decisions of my life. About the same time, I also decided to begin dating the woman who would eventually become my wife. I'm going to talk about those a little later on, and why they were significant to me. But simply becoming Orthodox and ordering your life according to the rhythms of the church, the daily, the weekly, the monthly cycle of services, the feasts and the fasts, and simply keeping a regular rule of daily prayer has been foundational for me. Because not only in the sense that because it gives structure and form to every day of my life, and to the week, and to the seasons, so that there's sort of a pulse. Once you've done it for a little while, there's sort of a pulse or this rhythm that really does give texture to the whole structure of your life. It's a subtle thing, but once you've been Orthodox for a few years, you'll know what I mean. But in addition to that, it's not just that, but even in the fruits of keeping a regular rule of prayer, of reading the scriptures regularly, and all, is that it does begin to clarify your understanding about what the rest of the world is like. Because what do the passions do? They distort you, okay? And the closer we can grow to Christ, the more we can grow in our observance and cleanse the eye of our soul, to cleanse the nous, and to gain a clearer insight into who God is, and to reduce the effect of the passions on us. Even if it's just a little bit, we see the world more clearly. I don't look at, granted, it's a function of age too, but it's just a function of maturity as well. I don't look at women with lust the way I did 30 years ago. I don't look at other men who are wealthier than me with envy or with jealousy. I don't look at the created world, as something that's simply ready to hand or to be used. I can look at the created world and begin to perceive a little bit of the hand of God who created it, and to see things inherently as they are, not how I want to use them or how they're beneficial to me, but simply the way reality is. And believe me, brothers, the more you can deal with reality and the world as it really is, the better off you're going to be. Because you're not dealing with your own distortions. You're not looking through the lens, of your own filthy passions that muck up the way that we interact with everybody else and the way that we interact with the rest of the world. So it really does ground you in reality when it grounds you with Christ, and that it saves you a lot of mistakes when you can see the world as it really is, when you can see people not something to be used. What was the old thing? When we're messed up, we use people and we value things, or rather than value people and use things, or something like that. But it does help to straighten you out a bit. So first off, yeah, Orthodox, and honestly, the reason that the Saint Paisios Brotherhood has a pledge, because I recommended it. These are foundational practices that every young man needs to have, that every Orthodox Christian needs to have. And there's a reason that there's a pledge, and there's a reason why they're foundational. And I encourage you, if you're not following along with the pledge, whether you sign up formally online or not, do those things. Do those things regularly for a month and see if your life doesn't change for the better. And then don't fixate on those because they're foundational. Okay. Christ is the cornerstone. St. Paul tells us he is the foundation upon which we have to build the rest of our lives. Okay. So get those pieces squared away so that the rest of your life, when you build on the foundation, you're building, with gold, silver, and precious stones, not with hay, straw, and stubble, but you want a firm foundation in your Orthodox faith and observance so that your heart is fixed on Christ, so that your mind is ordered by the gospel, so that the whole direction of your life is oriented fundamentally towards God. And if you have those things in place, then the rest of your life will go together a whole lot better. Yeah, and the rest of your when you fall, God willing, you won't fall as far or as hard if the orientation of your life is fundamentally correct. So make sure that you have those things fundamental, but get them in place. And I don't say sort of forget about them, but it's, sometimes we say, oh, I got to have my observance always in front of my eyes. Once it becomes habitual, you shouldn't have to pay that much attention to it because it should be automatic.
Right.
You get up in the morning, you empty your bladder, you brush your teeth, you brew your coffee, and you go in front of your icons and you say your morning prayers and you read your scripture. It's just part of what you do every day. And you don't have to give it thought. You don't have to put it on your to-do list. It's just part of who you are. Then you can get on with the rest of your life. And so long as it's grounded in Christ, you'll probably be okay. All right. So the first thing, Orthodox observance. The second thing that's really led to flourishing for me is that I learned how to study. I was a bright kid. I really didn't have to do much in public school. High school, there was homework, but it wasn't difficult. It was just time grinding out math problems or writing, term papers for classes or whatnot. It wasn't until I hit college that I discovered that I didn't really know how to study or how to manage my time well. And my first semester in college was the worst that I had. I was a C average student my first semester. It went up after that. But I really had to learn how to, my first day at university, my first class was literature. I was assigned the first two books of Homer's Iliad to be prepared by Wednesday. The next class was philosophy. We had, I think it's book 7 of Plato's Republic, which has the parable of the cave. I can't quite remember after that because by the time I had 2 books of 3 ancient Greek texts that I had to get through, in 2 days' time, I was already swamped. But what I learned to do in a study, and here, look, you ought to be taking notes now. Learn to read with a pencil. If it's important, you have a pencil in your hand. You underline text, you mark the margins, you write notes in the margins. On this, if it's something important, you don't want an ebook. You don't want a Kindle version. You want a hard copy so that someday when Amazon decides that it's no longer an appropriate book for you to have and they pull, and they pull it off the shelves, you still have your copy of it. But go through and take notes on everything that you read. And then if it's a really good book, don't go on to a second book. Go back and read the parts you underlined and fix it in your mind. And this is what we call study, okay? And it's not just casual reading, but it's a very deep reading. You learn to do that. And, maybe you don't read as many books, but the books that you do read are going to have a more fundamental impact on you. And you'll find over the course of time that there are things that are just really, really meaningful to you and that you'll always go back to. No More Mr. Nice Guy by Robert Glover, I read at least once a year. Getting Things Done, David Allen, it's fundamental text for time management. I read it at least once a year. Most recently, I found Stephen Kotler, The Art of Impossible. It's all about getting into flow states and actually neurochemistry and brain structure and all. Absolutely fascinating. And he gives practical tips on how to get into flow state and increase creativity. I've begun to use some of the stuff that he talks about. It's stupendous. I'll be reading that every year. And even when I have spare time, I just take up the book, even something, religious, like, the life of St. Silouan of Mount Athos. This is all underlined. There are marginal notes in here for everything I did. And if I need inspiration, I don't need to read the whole book. I can go back and just read the parts that I underlined. And that's the stuff that was most meaningful to me. And you keep track of these things. Okay. Let me tell you one other thing, a little trick that I've done that's been of stupendous help to me as well. Take notes when you're cruising around the interwebs. I use Evernote. I don't care what you use. But if I come across anything in any article or any blog post or anything that I find fascinating, I highlight it and I save it to Evernote. Maybe it's just an interesting word. Maybe it's a quotation from the fathers. Maybe it's a really insightful paragraph about something that I'm interested in. I just highlight it and I save it. And then periodically I go back and I read all of those things that I've clipped. I've been doing this, guys, for 15 years. And I eventually, on days when I need idiot's delight work, when I don't have brain capacity to do anything else, I'll take all of those out of Evernote and I'll put it into a Word document. And I have a Word document about 300 pages long of the best stuff that I have pulled off the web in the last 15 years. And you need inspiration. You need to know what's been important to you or what you found fascinating. That is one of the best repositories of knowledge that I have. And I commend it to you as a practice there. But again, learn to study, to acknowledge the things that are important, find a way to capture them and keep them so that you can continue to draw inspiration and wisdom and use from it later on. Okay? Learn to study. Third, be courageous. Where's the group chat? There's a group chat. I don't know, maybe I sent somebody to say. It's one of those things, yeah, I talk a lot about courage anyway, because I think it's a fundamental virtue for men, and we need to start with courage in our path towards manhood. There are developmental reasons for that, and also men, I find nowadays, are generally lacking a little bit in initiative and in courage. It may have to do with the universal decline in testosterone levels. It might be as simple as and as tragic as that. But most guys don't take a huge amount of initiative, and they don't really step out and put themselves at risk. Now, about 42 years ago, I did that. When I encountered Orthodoxy, I won't tell the whole story, but I encountered Orthodoxy the summer before my senior year in college. And till this point, I was voted in my graduating class the man most likely to become a priest. Now, there was a Roman Catholic seminary attached to my university. I went to a Catholic college. I had classmates who were seminarians, wore the uniform, and I was voted most likely to become a priest. Believe me, when I encountered Orthodoxy, this was an extremely difficult moral battle for me to fight. I literally laid awake at night for about 6 weeks before I finally decided, in this case, I need to follow my heart. Everything in my head said, there's no way you can leave the Catholic Church. There's no way you can give up on the Pope. You know all about papal primacy and infallibility. I still do to this day. It just doesn't matter anymore. But I decided I would follow my heart. And that made all the difference. But I had to make a decision and to do it. It was scary as hell, but I did it. And also, most of you probably don't know this, but I had this lightning bolt conversion experience when I was about 15 years old. And I was convinced that I was supposed to become a monk. So I was looking to graduate college and join a Catholic religious order, the Capuchin Franciscans, if you care to know. It would have been horrible. I would make a much better Benedictine, but that was where I thought at the time. And then I started working part-time at a local Catholic hospital in the lab. And there was this young med tech there with these big, gorgeous gray eyes. And we used to go out, the whole lab would go out together, on Friday nights, go out to Bennigan's and get a bucket of beer and, just hang, because Friday nights could be rough. And if the emergency room was erupting or it was a full moon and if people were going crazy, it's hard to work second shift and go home and go straight to bed. So we would go unwind at Bennigan's. And September the 13th, 19 93 at 2 a.m. when we had closed down the Binnigans, I kissed Annette for the first time. And we've been together ever since. But for the previous 7 years of my life, I knew I wanted to be a monk. Now, where the hell did that go? You know, but I knew that I needed to do this, and I wanted a relationship with this woman, and it was risky and it was scary. And she might have said no, you know, but it was one of the best decisions ever made in my life. And men were the ones who have to initiate. We're the ones who have to step out. I was the one who, a month and a day later told her I loved her. I was the one 14 months later to say, would you marry me? We're the ones who have to do that sort of thing. And if you learn to practice being courageous in little things, it makes it a whole lot easier to be courageous in big things. And this is even being courageous in your faith. And I'm not just talking about like converting from another faith to Orthodoxy. I mean, being firm in your convictions, being able to stand up for what you believe in, not allowing other people to undermine your faith in Christ or, your moral convictions, because this is what Christ asks of us in the gospel. But learning to be courageous and to initiate. Guys, life is not about you. You are about life, and you need to get out there and get after it. Okay? And it takes some courage. But when I learned the genuine benefits of taking initiative and being courageous, the best decisions of my life have been those where I took a risk and stepped out like that. And they've made all of the difference in my faith, in my marriage, my family life, even to begin the men's work that I started a few years ago. Everything. To decide that I wanted to be in a bodybuilding contest and contact my first coach, even that was substantial change in my life. So if you can find ways to be courageous, learn to do that. Okay. And also sort of a sub thing of that, learn to follow your heart. I'm not necessarily saying in everything, because sometimes we're young and we're really stupid. And if we follow our hearts, sometimes we're just going to get into a bunch of trouble. And I don't want you in a world of hurt. But sometimes if it's a battle between your head and your heart, maybe there's more adventure in doing what your heart says. And it might just be a swell ride. But give that some consideration. It might be one of the best decisions you ever make. So far I'm batting 1,000 on those times when I followed my heart. So I'll throw that out there to you. All right. Third thing that made substantial the habit that has given me a flourishing life, exercise. Most of my life, I was the fat kid. I nearly failed second grade PE because I was so uncoordinated I couldn't jump a rope. And to this day, I don't even know who all of the local Detroit major league sports teams are by name. I can't recite them all to you because I don't care. And the reason is because I was the fat kid who was picked last every time we had a game to play in elementary school. And I to this day, total antipathy for team sports. Okay. And I was even later on, I was the middle-aged guy who was in the gym, who was always on the elliptical and never lost any fat, who was always pumping iron and never got any stronger. And it's amazing how long we can do the same thing over and over again and not get, and expect different results. I know that's the definition of crazy. So, take that for what it's worth. I freely admit, to have been crazy for a number of years. But I had always wanted to be a bodybuilder. Ever since I saw, some of you are old enough to remember Charles Atlas ads in the back of comic books. Okay, I know that sort of dates me, but some of you will remember those. And I said, I wanted to look like that. And I always did. I remember from the time I was about 8 years old, and I never did anything about it until I was 53.
Oh.
I was 53 years old, and I finally said, I'm tired of looking. I have pushed myself academically. I have pushed myself spiritually. I'd like to push myself physically and see what I could do. And I found an online coach who had a 12-week transformation program. And I said to my wife, I'm going to do this. Would you be willing to change what you cook for dinner so that I can follow the diet? And she said, sure. And I began Uh, Come to find out, I wasn't eating right. I thought I was. I wasn't eating nearly enough protein. Once they corrected my diet and I got on a good progressive exercise program, suddenly the fat came off and I got prodigiously stronger. And I tell you what, if you don't know, the lessons that you learn in the gym are fungible for the rest of your life. My business coach, Bedros Keuilian, says that fitness is the gateway drug to men's self-improvement. If you can get into the gym and work strong and regularly, the lessons you learn there, they do translate into the rest of life. Because what are you going to learn first off? You go to the gym once. Are you going to see any results? No. Typically, you don't see results for a month. Your closest friends won't see results for 2 months. Everybody else will see results only after 3 months. But what do you learn immediately? You make a plan. You learn about commitment. You learn to stick to a plan. You go to the gym even when you don't want to go to the gym. So you learn some self-discipline. You learn to work through pain. You learn delayed gratification. You learn to trust the process. And those are helpful across the rest of your life. Absolutely. If you can learn that, the rest of it will take care of itself. You just work the program. Work the program. Work the program with, your Orthodox observance as well. Take your pledge, just work the program, and you'll see the effect it has. But learn to be consistent with that. So exercise was one of the things that really changed my life. Yeah, and I never want to go back to being the fat kid. I spent 9 years as a competitive bodybuilder. The things I learned, the friends that I made, it substantively changed my life. I discovered that when I began losing weight, I'll tell you this for the sake of the brother priests. I know that Father Mark doesn't care about this, but when I started losing weight, the women in my parish quit giving me so much shit, and I got more respect from the men. Now, they couldn't see anything because I wear a cassock when I'm at church, which covers everything. You can't see anything. But my attitude, the self-confidence that I had, because I was doing something that I always wanted to do and I was winning at it, and I was making progress, that translated into my whole bearing and the attitude I brought to everybody else around me, and it helped to order the rest of my life in ways that I would never have anticipated. It might do the same thing for you as well, just that change in self-confidence. Because there is something called the halo effect also, that when you present yourself with greater confidence and more self-assurance, people assume that you're better looking. They assume that you're wealthier than you are. They assume you're more intelligent than you are. And there are a lot of things that come with it, but it makes life easier. So if you've been neglecting your physique, if you're either skinny or you're fat, or you just haven't been exercising the way you need to take care of your body so that you can live the life you want, here's your wake-up call. Planet Fitness is $10 a month, guys. It's not that huge a thing. All right, but I give you that. The next thing, I've only got one more, and then the one thing that I haven't mastered yet. You have it in you to give. There's a shift in attitude that comes somewhere in your 20s, maybe in your 30s, for a lot of guys, that we're hustling for ourselves. We're hustling for ourselves. We're trying to grow up and get on our own so we can be independent, so we can live the life that we want. We go to college, we get our education because we want this career, we want to make money, we want to make our mark in the world, and it's largely still kind of self-centered. And I remember the day that I kind of realized, it was more a thing in business, but when I realized that businessmen weren't out there to make money. Businessmen were actually out there to solve people's problems, to relieve other people's pain and misery, and to add value to other people's lives. That was a game changer for me. Then I understood what was going on in the world. That's what the church does as well. We help relieve people's pain. We had help to add value to their lives, and we give ourselves freely to it. All right? So you have it in yourself to give. It's one of the things that has become fundamental to my understanding of my men's work. Now, that our very masculinity is a gift given to us by God. It's part of the human nature that we have been given. God made us male and female, so our very masculinity is given to us by God. It is a gift for which you should be grateful. If you're not, you should be grateful for it. But it is not given to you for your own self-aggrandizement. It's like any other gift. It is given to you so that, having received it freely and in gratitude, you in turn give your masculine gifts to the rest of the world. You are here to serve someone else. Look, the two great commandments, what are they? Love God and love your neighbor. You're not in that equation. Your orientation is first to God, and then secondly, outward to the rest of the world. So you learn to give of yourself. And sometimes you think, maybe, oh, what do I give? I'm too young. I don't have anything to give. Or, I don't know what goes through your mind. You do have something in you to give. Christ says in the gospel, if you give even a cup of cold water to one of the least of these, you will not lose your reward. And I've said on previous live calls that I've been on, even some of you younger guys, you think, oh, who am I? I'm a 22-year-old kid. No, do you know how much a word of encouragement from a college-age kid means to a teenage guy? You can always have a word of encouragement. You can always lift somebody else up. There's always something you can give in that respect, to anybody who's around you. And even that can make somebody's complete day. You never know the effect of what a word of encouragement or a word of gratitude can mean to somebody else. But you have it in you to give. And if you've been holding back, or you think, oh, I don't have enough of myself, you're sort of holding on to life with white knuckles. Learn to turn loose a little bit, to trust that God will take care of you. According to the psalmist, the Lord provides my needs according to his riches and mercy. God will provide for us. Trust in God a little bit and allow yourself to be a little generous with your time, with your gifts, with, like I say, a word of encouragement or support or kindness, and it will not come back to you unrewarded. Okay. So you have it in you to give. When I realized that my life, and I tell you what, for those of you who have done this, I'd love to hear from you when I'm through talking here in just a second. Some of you other guys who have realized how much more gratifying and satisfying life is when you're living in service of something bigger than yourself, when you're living in service to other people around you. That's where genuine satisfaction comes from. And so for me, once I learned I had stuff to give, it's been never ending. And that's really enriched me in a number of ways. And the one thing that I have not done, and with this I'll shut up, I have not yet mastered good rest and recreation. I still work too much. And, even Christ, after working and healing and teaching, went aside by himself to pray. So even in the gospel, Christ gives us the rhythm for our lives, and we need to take good care of ourselves. And if you're not taking good care of yourselves, brother, sooner or later, you come a cropper. Did burnout 3 times in my life, seriously. Been massively depressed 5 times and medicated 4 of those. Okay. I know whereof I speak when you work yourself. I ended up 48 hours in cardiac observation in the hospital about 15 years ago because I overworked myself. And I learned my lesson, more or less then, but at least learned the signs. I now see when there's a crisis coming on the horizon, and I don't wait until it, I'm physically debilitated and taken to the emergency room. Okay, that's never going to happen again. But you need to take care of yourself, and sometimes the best thing you can do is stop for a while and learn to rest and to step away. It's also good for humility, because then you're going to learn that, the world can actually get on without you. You're not that important. You're really not, and to take a little time for yourself so that you can come back even stronger tomorrow is often a very good thing to do. I have not entirely learned the lesson for that yet, because as Father Hans and I were talking before the call, we're both run ragged, and partly it's the home blessing season and all, but I know I don't take good enough care of myself, and I ain't the young buck that I used to be, and it wears me down even more. So, at any rate, that's it. I don't know maybe what y'all were expecting by ways of habits of a flourishing life, but if you get your spiritual life, well, if you learn to study so that you can remember and retain the things that are most important in life and put them to use, if you will learn to be courageous and to follow your heart now and again and to step out when maybe you're a little scared to do that, if you'll get good regular exercise, that by itself will change your life. And learn to be generous with your time, with your talent, with yourself, and even with simple words of encouragement and gratitude. Those things will change your life. I know, thinking about it, I think it's been the thing, like I say, those are the things that have meant most to me and have had the most impact on my life. There, I'll shut up and see what y'all have to say.
Men are in crisis. And men are in crisis because they don't know who they are or what they were created for. It affects their lives in big ways. You were not meant to struggle alone. Step out of the chaos. Discover the man that God created you to be. We challenge you. Join us. You will discover a life worth living. Join the Brotherhood.